Okay, good morning, everybody. This is my second flight, so don't give me any turbulence. I'm welcome to the Board of Trustees work session on January 27th, 2026. Appreciate you being here. We'll call to order the meeting at this time. Can I have the roll call from the clerk, please?
All right. Trustee Hull is here. President Mayberry.
Here.
Trustee Nicolette.
Good morning.
Trustee Phoenix.
Present.
Trustee Smith.
Here.
Trustee Westlake.
Here.
And Vice President Woodley will be delayed, correct? Okay. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Clerk Hull. All right, and now we will go to item 1.03. That's the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Mathers, why don't you give us the honor of doing that today? For the last 3 years, we've had the land acknowledgement, and we'll continue to do that. We thought we would just maybe change some of the wording. Has the same intent, same importance, same value. I asked Trustee Phoenix if there's an opportunity to update it, given that he is a member of the Paiute community, and he did streamline it a little bit, but it certainly has the same meaning, and we appreciate that. And I'm asking him this morning if he would read the land acknowledgement for us.
My name is James Phoenix. I'm from the Primitive Paiute tribe. So today we acknowledge that the Washoe County School District schools and the communities are situated in the traditional homelands of the three major tribes of the Great Basin Native American peoples, including the Northern Paiute, Washoe, and the Shoshone tribes. We honor their ancestors past and present, and we recognize these lands as a continued gathering place for communities. We express our respect and gratitude for the opportunity to live, work, and learn here in Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Phoenix. Okay, so the good news with this meeting is that it is a short agenda. The bad news is it's a long meeting. So item 2.01 is the thrust of what we'll be talking about today. This is a presentation and discussion regarding the Washoe County School District's fiscal year 2026-27 budget process. Before I begin, I do want to just set some ground rules for my colleagues. I'd like you to if you could, jot down any questions that you have. Acknowledge the respective slide that you may have questions on. Just hold your questions till the end if you could, and then once the presenters are done, we'll have a round robin, and you'll have as much time as you need to ask any questions that you have. We just want to make sure that our community members who are watching understand and can hear in full context of the presentation, and certainly respect the time and the preparation of our presenters. Okay. So with that, pleased to have Mark Mathers, our Chief Financial Officer, Jeff Bozzo, our Deputy Chief of Finance, Budget and Planning, and Doug Owen, our Chief Human Resources Officer. Good morning, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. President and trustees. So this morning we will be bringing recommendations to you that, depending on the different enrollment scenario you may select, will resolve our estimated budget deficit for fiscal year 27. So ideally, again, based on which enrollment scenario is chosen, we will have enough information to compile and prepare a tentative budget for you. We'll still come back to you for analysis of those board requests that you had made in October, but ideally, again, if we can get decisions today, we will resolve our deficit for the coming fiscal year. So today there are two major decisions that we are asking you to make. The first, again, has to do with enrollment assumptions. As we'll talk about in a few slides, when we began our budget process all the way back in September, we believe that a new major charter school in our North Valleys would be opening in August of 2026. Since then, we've received information that might challenge that assumption, and so we'll be bringing to you the two different enrollment scenarios for you to select at the end of this presentation. And then secondly, of course, we'll be presenting a budget reduction plan to you. That a lot of work has gone into that since the fall, since we last met on the fiscal year 27 budget. We'll go through those recommendations in great depth with you. And then again, we're asking for a decision on that. That'll allow us both to prepare our fiscal year 27 budget, but also more importantly, allows time for our employees to kind of look at opportunities and seek opportunities for those employees, again, that may be affected by the budget reduction plan. And then lastly, just an informational item, we'll update you on events in DC, which are always a moving target, but again, grant-funded positions are a big part of our budget too, so we want to make you aware of what's happening there. So our agenda kind of tracks that whole discussion. Again, we'll start with an update on our deficit estimate and talk about enrollment scenarios there. Then we'll go into our budget reduction plan and follow through with the end, of course, being next steps and a decision from our board. So I wanted to kind of set this up for viewers and you trustees, and before I kind of turn it over to Jeff here. As you know, we've been at this for a while. All the way back in June of 2025, when we approved the 26 budget, our current year budget, we had told you that we anticipated a deficit of at least $10 million. Unfortunately, that was true. We also asked, and you approved the concept of vacancy and contract reviews that would come forward to the Financial Review Committee, a committee of 5 executives here, including myself. And so we've done that. Over the summer and fall and through today, the Financial Review Committee has looked at all general fund vacancies in the central office that have come forward for posting. We've held many of those vacancies vacant, kind of understanding what we would be confronted with whenever possible, and as well as those holds that we place on vacant positions. In some cases, departments chose not to bring forward vacancies, again, knowing kind of what was coming. In addition, we looked at every new general fund contract or renewing or extension of a general fund contract, again, trying to determine whether that contract was truly needed, whether we could do without it, whether there were savings that we could renegotiate with our vendors there. So that has helped a lot get us to where we are today in terms of making recommendations to you. Then back in September, again, we came to you with an estimated deficit of $18.4 million, and you took action to reduce that deficit by $11.1 million, a huge amount. So we were left with a deficit of 8.3, and again, that was based on an enrollment scenario that we want to revisit later this morning. I want to stop there. It's not usually my practice to kind of assign blame, if you will, but I wanted to talk about that $18.4 million deficit. As you know, and as we've been telling you for a while, there really are two major trends that affect the district's finances. The first of those is the level of state support we receive. And again, most of you know more than 98% of our general fund revenues come directly from the state. And so, as you know, the state funded per pupil increases of less than 1% in each of the 2 years this biennium. So very, very minimal increases to our per pupil amount. The second trend or issue that affects our finances, of course, is our enrollment situation. And we're not alone. As you'll hear, most districts, if not all districts in the United States, are seeing the same falling birth rate trend that we do. and that results in falling enrollment over the long term. But going back to the issue of state funding, a common question we get is, well, between those two trends, which is worse, or which affects our deficit the most? What we did was model our budget with no enrollment increase. And if we had no enrollment increase, our deficit still would have been $13.1 million. So 72% of that $18.4 million deficit we can attribute to the low level of state support, frankly, that we've received. And there's many reasons for that, and the state has their reasons, but that's our reality. 72% can be attributed to that, and the remaining 26% is due to falling enrollment. So I just wanted to cover that ground one more time with you and with viewers if they're watching, so that we kind of understand, again, what is impacting our budget. Since those actions by the board in September, the executive team has met many, many times to look at budget reduction scenarios, and we'll talk about that. And so all of the work done through the fall up to now has been really comprised of that intensive operational analysis that we did. In addition to those analyses that we've done, we have been doing, as you know, a couple long-term, pursued a couple long-term ideas to, again, address our situation. The first of those, as you're well aware of, is the facility modernization plan. And so this board has taken many, many actions related to that FMP plan, including school rezoning, consolidations. We're looking at repurposing of schools. And then secondly, we've restarted the implementation of a new fiscal, financial, human resources system. Both of those long-term efforts will help address this current year deficit to some degree, but more in the future. And so I don't want to minimize those long-term efforts, because that is going to help us stay current or get ahead of the fiscal challenges we face, as opposed to some of the other agencies you may have read about. So all of this pre-planning has been deliberative. It's been incremental work that really has helped mitigate the situation we face today. And again, if you take action today on our budget reduction plan, we believe we can resolve the deficit today. I've talked a lot already about our deficit. I guess the point of this slide really is that there are no magic bullets or something around the corner that's really going to help our situation. So as most of you know, the state prepares and approves a two-year budget, and that sets our per pupil funding for each of the 2 years, both fiscal year 26 amount and the fiscal year 27 amount that you see there, $97.81 per pupil. And so that's locked in. We recognize you may want a little bit more time to think through things, but we do hope that you can make decisions today, because really there are no unknowns really at this point, aside from minor tweaks that we may see in 27 to weighted funding. But I don't expect even in those areas dramatic increases to our funding. So we know our situation. We've got to deal with our situation. The sooner we make decisions, again, the sooner we give our employees opportunities to consider alternatives, and it gives us time to, again, finalize our budget. One last point, as most of you know, Washoe County School District is not alone in this situation. This is not unique to the school district. The other major local governments in Washoe face similar size deficits. I'm not aware that they've begun kind of a similar level of review with their governing bodies and budget work that we're seeing here today, but they'll have to before June to be able to file a budget. But they had noted last fall multi-million-dollar deficits as well, and that's based again on very flat revenues, local revenues, whether it's sales tax or other revenues. So they are facing the same challenges we are, and as most of you are aware, there's one school district for sure, and I think more that have not gone as widely reported, who are facing major financial challenges. They've basically burned through their entire fund balance in the general fund. And so, again, all of our efforts to date have placed us kind of in better footing than those other districts I'm alluding to, in that, we've not dipped into our fund balance yet, and we have these short-term and long-term efforts to maintain fiscal responsibility and, maintain a balanced budget going forward. So just, again, trying to set you up for today and the rest that'll come. That's kind of our situation. And now with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Mark. So as Mark noted, in September when we presented our preliminary budget deficit to you, that included an enrollment decrease of over 1,200 students, with more than half of that, 733 students, due to the opening of the Matter Academy Charter School in the North Valleys area. We reviewed board minutes for Matter Academy, and because of current litigation with that project, their minutes indicate that permitting won't be issued in time for them to start construction and open in August of 2026, which pushes the opening of the charter school to 2027. August of 2027, which would push the impact of that 733 student enrollment decrease to FY28. We still believe that the school intends to open, so it's a matter of when, not if, we'll feel that enrollment impact. So with that information, we've prepared a second budget deficit estimate. So the middle column in the table at the bottom, you'll see the remaining $8.3 million deficit that we presented in September. If we take the 733 student enrollment decrease out for the impact of Matter, what that does is leave us with a $5.3 million deficit for FY27. So at the end of today's presentation, one of the decision points that you'll have is to choose the enrollment scenario. So there's really two pathways here. On the first row, it's to continue to assume the full enrollment impact of Matter Academy and the $8.3 million deficit, but then we would need to consider budget reductions that are beyond what will be presented today, or we can shift the enrollment impact to FY28, deal with the known FY27 impact, and today's budget reduction plan would resolve the FY27 budget deficit, and then we would address the Matter enrollment impact in FY28. In addition to the revised estimates, deficit estimates, we also have some fine-tuning of cost and savings in the general fund. So the first part is related to sanctioned sports. So lacrosse was sanctioned during the last legislative session, and cheer could be sanctioned this year through the NIAA. The costs that you see there include coaches' fees, officials' fees, dues increases, and transportation costs related to those sports. So we've added those in right now until we have more information on those. We've also had a funding or Jobs for Nevada Graduates program that has been grant funded for many years and is currently funded by AB 495, which the funding for that ends on 12/31/26. So the idea here is to shift that cost to the general fund so we can continue that program at our high schools. In September, we presented the personnel savings due to the closure of Pine Middle School. Further review on the non-personnel side shows a little over $100,000 in utility savings that we can count. Then here at the bottom, we had estimated $2.2 million for the addition of iReady into the general fund, and initial estimates of the iReady cost are about $200,000 less than that. So we'll take out another $200,000 from the general fund. There's also the potential for partial or full state reimbursement for iReady now that they've switched to iReady as their official assessment platform. At best, we anticipate partial reimbursement because the state would use it for K-3 English language arts testing, where we use it for multiple subjects in kindergarten through 8th grade. So in total, the net cost impact at the general fund is an additional $400,000. And you'll see on this slide here, that brings the revised estimates to $5.7 million deficit if we do not assume Matter Academy enrollment impacts, and then $8.7 million if we continue to assume the full impact of Matter Academy. So with that, I'll hand it off to Mark to go over our budget reduction plan.
Okay. Again, one of the questions we get is, why are we looking at central services, that function? Why are we looking at non-school-based positions and staffing? And so we wanted to kind of talk about that. You know, when we see falling enrollment, I think what is not acknowledged is that we reduce the number of teacher positions we have at schools based on our class size guidelines. And so that's kind of an automatic calculation and reduction that reduces, again, teacher positions at our schools. We don't have a like kind of staffing guideline formula for our central office. So there's no formula that I can use that says, based on X hundreds of millions of revenues, I need Y number of accountants. And that goes for, you know, virtually all of the non-academic areas. There's just no established industry ratios that we can rely upon. And so when we see enrollment drop 0.5% or 1% a year, that's just not enough to really kind of trigger that reevaluation of staffing. But because we've seen a 10% enrollment drop over the last 5 to 6 years, I think we have crossed that threshold when a reevaluation, reassessment of staffing levels in those areas is warranted, and basically we need to engage in some right sizing in those functions. And so that's why we're doing this and bringing this to you. If we don't make kind of parallel proportional reductions in our central office, then that function just becomes a bigger and bigger part of our budget. And we want to maintain kind of the same level of resources devoted to our schools versus central office. There's also a state regulation that caps central services costs. So we need to do this, and it's the right thing to do. And so, again, now that we've kind of crossed that 10% threshold, this is the time to do it. We face a deficit. So, you know, I hope that explains kind of why we're here today and why we're looking at the functions we are. We're fortunate, I guess, in the sense that we can eke out $5.7 million in efficiencies from those areas without touching greatly operations or other areas that we talked about this fall. As we'll note in a slide that comes, this is it, though, for central office. I mean, this is the extent at which we can further fine-tune staffing at this time. Anything beyond the $5.7 million of reductions you see here would require deeper cuts and cuts into the operations slide there, that green slide, whether that's facilities or transportation. And certainly, you know, those reductions would start to impact service levels at schools, and we might even have to touch academic areas. So again, the numbers worked out that we didn't have to do that, at least in this first cut, and again, based on the enrollment scenarios you select. So again, this fall, the executive team just started developing budget reduction ideas. We were tasked with percent reduction scenarios, which we each prepared and provided to the superintendent and the executive team. We've worked comprehensively on that plan. We'll talk about it in depth here in the next few slides. But as I've indicated, again, this plan results in $5.7 million of savings, which matches the amount of the deficit in that scenario in which we don't assume Matter Academy. So, you know, kind of that's a summary slide before we kind of start going through things in depth here. Certainly, as we spent months and months and months reviewing those budget reduction plans from each chief, we did a ton of cross-checking, cross-functional cross-checking to make sure we did a good job of understanding those impacts on schools or other offices. And what guided us here are these budget principles that we outlined to you again this fall. So the last thing we want to do is touch that first priority and affect supports to, in terms of the bell-to-bell instruction of our students. Where we tried to mine dollars was near the bottom of this prioritization list at the right. We looked at certainly central office services that were discretionary, that we can not do, that are not mandated. Looked at pilot programs. We looked at opportunities to streamline and generate efficiencies. And so all of those were kind of where we focused, and I think where we successfully landed. This wasn't easy work. I don't want to minimize the human impact here. It was intense work, difficult work, but again, we face a deficit and we've got to address that deficit head on. Where we really kind of first started, though, I want to make clear, is our non-personnel costs. We want to do our employees right, and even though more than 90% of our budget is salaries and benefits of our employees, we first again looked to do those contract reviews, looked at how we spent our non-personnel budget. And so of the $5.7 million in reductions that you're going to see on subsequent slides, recognize that $1.8 million is actually non-personnel cuts, whether they're to contracts or, as you can see here, training budgets. We looked at software. We looked at kind of our usage of that software. Where could we renegotiate lower costs based on lower usage, or again, when it came to a service or function provided by contracted services, could we do without it? Are there free opportunities available due to AI or just the market? And so those were all the questions that we asked ourselves. And again, roughly 30% then of the proposed reductions you see here are in the non-personnel area. And that was an intense effort we went through again since the summer. I think we've covered this to a great degree. Doug, I don't know if you have anything to add to about the process.
Yeah, I think the last bullet point on this one is pretty impactful, just so that everyone is aware. And we'll talk about the numbers here in a minute, but all impacted full-time employees would be able to secure placement in other positions. So we are not talking about reducing and people being out of a position or out of a job. They're still maintaining employment. And actually, as an upside benefit, many of those people are moving from central services toward a school. So you may have an assistant that's located here in central office that may move to a school as an assistant. And we'll dive into some of those numbers here in a minute. But with this very direct and targeted approach, by engaging each one of those chiefs, we were able to identify those specific positions that they were able to, are able to continue and maintain operations within compliance, but also shift those individuals to positions that are of higher value to us as a district. So I don't have the clicker thing.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
So we'll start with, again, kind of non-academic areas. I want to talk a little bit again more about kind of the type of analysis we did. As we note here on this slide, this really was operational analysis, highly technical in nature. I wouldn't call it policy, public policy level analysis. It really was looking at each of our operations and determining where we could streamline costs and positions and still maintain an adequate service level to our schools and students. And so, for example, in my department, some of the analysis or data points that I looked at included workloads of positions, a review of what is mandated versus unmandated work and functions. We looked at my span of control of my supervisors and managers, i.e. kind of that middle management ranks. For unmandated tasks, and there are many that are unmandated, prioritizing that work between what I would analyze and consider lower value work, no offense, versus higher level work. Again, where do we see the best outcomes? Where are the supports to our schools versus, say, reporting that doesn't get a lot of eyes on it? Where can we streamline and automate tasks? Again, through AI. We've started doing that in our purchasing department to kind of relieve staff of doing the mundane work they used to have to. I looked at synergies and overlaps between departments. And in my office, we've taken on a number of new functions over the last 2 years. Where can our accounting staff and our existing budget staff support those functions that have come in and reduce the redundancies that occur because they were outside of the business office before? And then lastly, certainly, again, we looked at service levels. So a lot of the conversations between, for example, my purchasing director, Andrew Sullivan, and I was, can we afford to do things a little bit more slowly, or accounts payable? Can we afford to pay our vendors a little bit more slowly and still stay within the net 30 terms that we do need to abide by? So it was looking at those operating issues and kind of what I'd call really technical work. We want to, again, be able to maintain operations and operate at a high level, of course, but what could we, again, squeeze out efficiencies from? And so in all of these cases, with the recommendations you see here, chiefs are committed to making this work. We've looked at our organizations. These are really subject matter expert recommendations where we, as the subject matter experts that have years of experience and degrees in, said, okay, what can we maybe not do or at least streamline doing to achieve these savings? If we start to pick apart the recommendations here, that probably would require a re-review by the subject matter experts. It's like pulling the thread on a suit, right? At some point the suit falls apart. And so, a tremendous amount of this work was intertwined within the departments inside of each of our offices. So I just want to kind of talk about, again, that analysis we all did, again, to maintain operations while also achieving these reductions. And so I'll just start in my office here, the first one listed in the business office. We are deleting most of the time just one position, in a couple cases 2 positions each, in the accounting department, budget department, risk management department, grants department, and warehouse. And then we are also downgrading one of our 2 controller positions to an assistant controller. So we'll go back to having 1 controller and 2 assistant controllers. And so, again, these are support positions, what I'd call back office positions. They are not frontline workers working with schools. At the same, generally speaking, at the same time, we didn't want to cut worker bees, if you will, for lack of a better term. So again, where we could, we looked at those support or clerical functions or mid-management functions and not eliminate kind of the frontline workers.
I'll continue the conversation, very similar to what Mark alluded to, but in human resources, I saw this as a right sizing where recent technology upgrades with some of our vendors with Experian, which was actually a zero cost upgrade, higher right, some of the other contracts you've seen before you, we were able to streamline our background check process, right, over the last probably 18 months. As a result, we have an administrative position that would regularly review those, but that's been streamlined and automated, so we no longer need to have that function. There's also a document scanning component that has been automated. We don't do that anymore. We don't print it off and then scan it right back into the computer. So just through some process updates, we have a clerical aid, for example, that we don't need that function anymore. So in the Office of HR, we had 1 vacant position. We had 2 administrative assistants, a clerical aide, and then we had a project manager. And so these reductions are really a result of either technology that we've already implemented to be able to streamline and automate, or future technology that we're anticipating through things like the ERP project. I'll move on to IT, and we're not going to have every individual come up and talk about it, but these specific positions were evaluated through, and I'll talk about the reduction in software costs first, we went and looked at the usage of specific softwares and licenses that are out there. Think about Microsoft, for example. If you have that on your laptop and you're not using it, why do you need it? How about we pull that back and save a little bit of money? And if you need it back in the future, great, we'll have a conversation. But we found a lot of that usage analysis that was able to save us some money there as well. In the IT infrastructure space and IT services spaces, we still have people doing those functions. It may just be delayed. So you may have had 3 people doing a function before, now there'll be 2, so it may take you a little bit longer to resolve your problem. And then on asset management, again, the same thing. We previously had 2 individuals, we'll now have 1. So continuing on through here, the communications organization previously had an intern that wouldn't be renewed, and that's fairly standard. It's a year-over-year type of activity, as well as a vacant executive assistant position. In our operations organization, there's a new central yard opening up in spring of 2026 and some new routing software that's been implemented that will allow us to reduce a position previously titled a coordinator, now a manager, through some action that we took a month ago. But we no longer need that position as a result of some of those new things that are up and coming. In our school police organization, there's a dispatch position that's been vacant for quite a while. We've been filling it with a retiree as a critical labor shortage position. But again, our subject matter expert made a determination we can move on from that position. Did you want to take the next 2, Mark?
Sure. So in internal audit, they currently have 2 vacant auditor positions. We had discussions with our chief internal auditor. He expressed the view that he could live with deleting one of those 2 vacant positions. We also kind of highlighted and discussed if there are peak workload issues for our audit function, we can always access and use a contracted external auditor to supplement the work of that office. So that's always available, again, based on maybe unique or kind of peak situations. And then our general counsel's office, Neil and his staff identified a number of professional development reductions or other reductions that shave off close to $135,000.
Moving on to reductions in academic departments, again, these reductions were focused on central office and management and administrative staff rather than directly impacting schools. There's also, what you'll see are ideas to convert existing positions or contracts into something new to better serve our students. So the first one here under the superintendent and deputy superintendent budget, for the last 3.5 years, we've had a vacant government affairs position. We've tried and tested the contracted lobbying services, and that has worked well. So in this proposal, the budget for the contracted lobbying services would remain, and the government affairs position that has been vacant would be deleted. In the Office of Elementary and Secondary Academics, again, this was focused on administrative and clerical staff position reductions, reductions of operating and travel budgets, and then also a resetting of our on-call assistant budgets based on historical usage. This is like the IT license example that Doug gave on the previous slide. And then in the Office of Student Services, again, reducing management and administrative positions in counseling, health services, and family school partnerships, and then resetting some central office staff based on the closure of Pine. In the Office of Student Development Success, this area wasn't just straight reduction. So in the first area is a conversion of a behavior contract to a board certified behavior analyst. This allows us to give more days of service from the position, the service the way we want, and also achieves a small savings at the same time. Then 3 years ago, when this board approved deans and APs to be added at elementary schools to address the standalone principal issue at elementary schools, It resulted in some duplicate dean positions at some of our elementary schools. Our social intervention program had a dean specific to provide behavior supports to that program, but now with 2 deans being at those schools, through the hard work of Chief Van Tress and her team, they reviewed this, and rather than having the duplicate dean position, the recommendation is to convert those to board certified behavior analyst positions, again, to get better supports to our students and more days of service through those positions. And the next item, converting physical therapist, occupational therapist, audiologist, and speech language pathologist contracts to district positions, was really based on our historical issues of having a hard time hiring for those positions. It was a situation where we'd have to convert the vacant positions to contracted services in order to provide those services to students. It has been a priority of the district to address the salaries of these positions, and in the last round of negotiations in partnership with WEA, that was done. So we can convert these positions to, or these contracted services back to positions and achieve quite a bit of savings. Most of the non-personnel reductions in that last bullet point are due to the conversion of these positions. And then lastly here, a reduction of home hospital teachers based on lower home hospital program caseloads. So our home hospital teachers provide instruction to students that can't attend school due to a health issue, which could be temporary or ongoing. But like all special education positions, they are adjusted to what the caseloads are or to enrollment from time to time. And the school's individual education plan team assigns how those services are provided, so it can be provided through a home hospital teacher or through services provided through their zone school. So currently, we used to have around 40 students in home hospital, and now we have 27 students in the home hospital program. 9 of those students have IEPs that assign the services to their zone schools. 8 students are attend Piccolo and can be serviced through a repurposing a vacant teacher position at Piccolo into a specific home hospital teacher for those students. And then the remaining 10 students will be serviced through 2 remaining home hospital teachers, so that's a caseload of 5 each. The maximum caseload in Nevada Administrative Code 388 is 10 students per teacher, so there is room if there's additional home hospital students that come through that are assigned to those teachers. Additionally, again, through analysis through Chief Van Tress and her team, what we've seen is teachers traveling across town throughout the day from up into the North Valleys to Northwest Reno to Galena out to Spanish Springs, not necessarily in that order, and multiple home hospital teachers doing that. So there's also an opportunity to reassign the students to the teachers based on the geographic area, so teachers spend less time driving and more time providing instruction to students.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bazzo. Just from an academic standpoint as well, we thought it was important to identify some of the momentum that we've had going forward with academic programming. The team has shared the hierarchy of budget considerations. We've talked about really trying to maintain the resources that we provide for our schools, our students, and our families. And while we have shared some of the proposed cuts, I think it's also important to look at a few areas that remain. We were able to maintain our current class sizes. Previously, where we have had large budget deficits in Washoe County School District, this was an area that was reviewed and in fact moved upon. We've been able to maintain our class sizes with this recommendation. Our Board of Trustees has identified not having standalone principals as an important component to help with the academic programming that's occurring in schools. We've been able to maintain one dean or assistant principal at the elementary school and continue our ratios in middle and high school. And we look at our collaborative schools. Collaborative schools is a model that is built on support for our lower performing schools. We saw tremendous progress, accelerated growth with these schools, and in fact, we're not touching any part of that. We'll continue to serve the same number of schools. We'll continue to provide those same supports. And last year, in fact, we did see accelerated proficiency and growth when compared to non-collaborative schools. Our board has also identified how important it is to recognize our clubs and activities. Last year, we were able to build the data system that records which students are accessing these clubs and activities. We saw a significant expansion last year. You'll see in the next board presentation even more expansion in this area. Again, what we're seeing is it's impacting connectivity, it's impacting attendance, it's impacting academic outcomes. And so what we've been able to do is continue to maintain the momentum with the academic programming and not chip away at parts of it, but keep it in full. Our Board of Trustees has previously identified the importance of campus supervisors in our middle school and our high schools, able to maintain those resources. Our principals will tell you what a tremendous asset those personnel are in the buildings. Our walk zones, we've been able to, there was a real commitment in previous years to the walk zones, and we've been able to maintain that. We continue to pay for the dual credit concurrent enrollment fees and see some real benefits from this for our students. We look at our CTE programming, an area that just continues and continues to grow. And we've been able to provide transportation and not have to reduce some of that. And so while the presentation has focused on some of the areas that have been cut, equally important are the pieces that have not been cut, knowing the return on investment that we're seeing with these programs. So we just thought that it was important to highlight those aspects as well.
Thank you, Superintendent Ernst. This next slide shows a summary of the reductions by chief or office. And what you'll see here is the majority of the FTE and the dollar reductions are in the central office and non-academic areas. Again, that was in line with the budget hierarchy and budget priorities we had during this process. And again, thanks to Doug and his team for making sure that all impacted employees could secure placement through vacancies or upcoming retirements. A quick summary of the recommended position reductions. There's a total of 48 positions being recommended for conversion or reduction. 19 of those positions are currently vacant, with 29 of those currently being filled. In total, this impacts 38 individuals through what's known as the bumping process, which Doug will go over later in this presentation. Let's see, we've hit on that point a couple times already. So with the certain exceptions of a couple positions based on pending retirements, these positions would be deleted on June 30th or ended on June 30th, 2026. So a decision today would also allow those employees time to find other positions if they wish to before the end of the fiscal year if their placement in the vacant position isn't what they desire. With that, I will hand it over to Doug.
Thanks, Jeff. And on that last point, I just want to reiterate one thing. So, or two actually. So the current analysis is a point-in-time analysis of what positions are currently open and vacant. And so when we do that, we say, okay, here are the bumping that could occur. So those 38 individuals that you see, it may be reduced, right? So if a position becomes vacant, or there's another opening in another organization, we wouldn't have to bump someone. So I'll revisit that one as well. And then the second point I would make is by making these changes now, or if you were to approve this today, the current transfer windows for people that are in organizations like represented by WEA or by WESPA, those are currently open. That gives those employees an opportunity to go apply and find jobs that they would desire to be in, as opposed to if we were to push this off, those transfer windows will be closing, and they may not have as much selection available. So I'm going to talk a little bit here. I think in prior conversations, at least with the executive leadership team and our central office, and we had discussed somewhat of a voluntary separation program. This was back in September when we were evaluating an $18 million deficit. I think Mark covered that on slide 5 toward the beginning of the presentation. And to do this, it made sense if you were looking for north of 100 individuals that you were looking to reclaim those positions, right? That's not the situation we're in anymore. Now we're looking at a very targeted approach where you're impacting potentially 29 individuals, not 100. That cost of doing something at that 100-person scale, we modeled out at that $5 million to $7.5 million cost to incentivize people to take a voluntary separation program. This isn't a novel idea. This is very common. I think City of Sparks did it. There's been other local agencies that have done that. But we didn't feel as though we needed to go that broad base now that we have a very targeted approach. In addition, this would be a very limited scope. So we would only be targeting central office positions. I wouldn't be per se asking teachers if they wanted to volunteer, because I need teachers to stay, as I have, many teacher openings. And we would also run the risk of self-selection. So you may have an entire organization, maybe all the accountants take the voluntary separation program, but I'm going to have to backfill accountants because I need those in the organization. So there are several reasons why and risks behind why we chose not to go down this path. This is not our recommended alternative. The next page basically summarizes that as a pros, cons, but they're the same points that are there, so I don't need to reiterate those for you. And then finally, I think just as a conclusion, I'll speak to the money side. I know it's not typical for the HR guy to talk about the money side of this, but if you were to go down the voluntary separation path, it would be dipping into ending fund balance to provide some incentives that would be that we would recoup those costs over the next 18 months to 36 months. So it would take you much longer to recognize the savings than if you did a targeted reduction plan. So the reduction plan, I think the last bullet on this one, it allows us time to communicate to our impacted associations, our impacted individuals, and then our chiefs to make plans on how they're going to account for that workload. The voluntary separation plan really didn't allow us to do that. So again, that wasn't the recommended path. With that, I'll turn it back over to Mark to talk about grant-funded positions.
Yep. Thanks, Doug. Just a few slides on to talk about our federally funded grant positions. As we all know, an area of instability over the last several years has been kind of what's happening in D.C. This slide again summarizes the programs that are funded by the federal government. They do total more than $30 million, and although proportionally maybe is a small amount of our overall budget, the impacts of all of these programs are significant and they're important. And so, our grants team remains focused here, certainly, and we're constantly monitoring kind of what is happening in D.C. So on that note, one really significant change that it happened under the radar until kind of a court kind of started looking at this was we've seen basically a breakup of the U.S. Department of Education. Unbeknownst to anyone, the Department of Ed entered into interagency agreements with the Departments of Labor, Interior, and Health and Human Services to basically offload, delegate, contract out functions that were formerly done by the U.S. Department of Education. And so most of our title programs will be managed in the future, barring a court decision to the contrary by the U.S. Department of Labor. They have no experience managing a program the size of Title I or the other title programs, nor do they have the expertise. But that is the plan of the administration. And you can see there where the other programs, Perkins, Adult Ed, and Indian Education, will be transferred to. So this is happening or happened. And we'll see how this plays out. Probably not well in terms of administration of these programs, honestly, because again, these departments, it's outside their wheelhouse, really. But we wanted to note that to you. The good news is that the House of Representatives did introduce legislation last week that would fund Titles 2 through 4 at the same or slightly increased levels for the following fiscal year. So we were very concerned about significant cuts and going to a block grant approach for Titles 2 through 4. That seems to be off the table ahead of congressional elections in November of 2026. The House actually approved the Consolidated Appropriations Act, and we were hopeful that the U.S. Senate would approve it, but you've probably seen the news where the Senate's balking based on events in another state, and so who knows? The government will shut down without this Consolidated Appropriations Act. So we were hopeful last week, not so hopeful this week. But again, the good news is we don't see massive reductions in funding to these programs. And then lastly, we did get kind of a pilot program funding for congressionally funded community projects, grants. There's 2 of those. We saw really great outcomes out of 4 MTS positions that were funded by that term limited grant, and so we will be we found a way to continue to fund those positions in our special ed area. So again, good news. Just wanted to kind of take a time out here to talk about the federal government and kind of developments there.
Okay, and as we talk about personnel, of course, we review our negotiated agreements, and so there are some requirements in there. 2 that I did not put on this slide that I will speak to briefly, the Washoe Education Association and the Washoe School Principals Association. They don't actually consider these reductions in force yet. These are overages, which is a standard process that we go through every year where allocations are adjusted, and that's effectively what's happening here. So individuals have an opportunity to enter into an overage transfer window, which is currently open, and will be open, and there's actually a couple different windows in there. And then we go through an overage placement process. So based on those individuals' preferences, their desires to go work in the vacant positions we have, they get assigned to one of those. And if that doesn't work out, then we end up placing them in a vacant position. If we don't have any vacant positions and we haven't placed anybody, then we start talking about a reduction. We don't anticipate that will actually happen. The other 2 associations that have been impacted, WIPTA and WESP, so that's our Washoe Professional Technical Association and our Education Support Personnel Association. I left some notes up here. So the first one is we do have to ask for volunteers in their reduction process, meaning once we've identified a very specific, they call it occupational series, which is in Appendix C of the negotiated agreement. So let's say we talk about accounting, right? We have to go ask anybody in accounting if they'd like to volunteer for a reduction. So we will have to do that. And then if anybody does volunteer, then the person that we've identified based on lowest seniority, lowest FTE, and basically the lowest on the totem pole, if you will, they won't be bumped or they won't lose their position. The person that volunteers will lose, and then this person will move into that position. So it gets a little complicated, but we do have to ask for volunteers in each one of those occupational series, and that happens in both WESP and in WIPTA. Through that, we have notified every association that I've previously mentioned, and that is required by the contract up to 60 working days in advance. Now, we are well ahead of that timeline, which has been appreciated by our associations, because we could come to them in April and say, hey, we're making this action, and they'd say, wait a minute, you haven't given us a lot of time for these employees to find new employment. So we've already made that notification. We've already talked to every single individual that may be impacted by this. Again, it's a fluid situation. Vacancies can open up between now and the end of June. So the people that we've talked to, we've informed them of that, and they may or may not be bumped or instigate the bumping process. Small note, so if you're intern or probationary or confidential employee, you do not have bumping rights. I'll go to the next slide really quick. Those 5 individuals where it says occupied by non-represented employees, that's where we're talking about our confidential employees. Confidential in this sense is defined under NRS 288, which talks about individuals who could impact the collective bargaining process or the effectuation of collective bargaining agreements. So that's what that actually means. Those individuals don't have bumping rights necessarily, but we have located a position for all of them as well if they choose to accept. These communications that we had with staff occurred over the prior week, and we're very clear that none of these changes would be implemented until after board approval, and then still wouldn't be done until June 30th at the earliest. I think Jeff mentioned earlier, there are some retirements that are happening where people are going to retire in, let's say, October. We're just going to keep them whole through October and not make them retire on June 30th if they're seeking, kind of their final years in PERS or whatever that case might be. The last topic I'll bring up, through bumping, and because these people are being involuntarily displaced, if you will, you don't lose pay. So there is, within the WESP contract and within the WIPTA contract, if you are affected by a reduction, we take where you currently are on your salary schedule, and if you were to go to a lower position, lower graded position, you would take your salary and you might move up a few steps, but you're not actually going to lose money. You don't go back to step 1, or you don't go to your current step on the lower grade. So that's in WESP and in WIPTA, and that's not a, hey, you're whole for 1 year kind of deal. You just get placed there, and that's where you are. So no one actually has a direct impact on their salary as a reduction.
So just to recap a little bit, again, we've been through a process that have taken, roughly 4 months of reviews, analysis. Again, every chief was commissioned to develop a 10% reduction scenario. That resulted in actually more than 15 million of possible reductions. But many of those reductions were kind of longer term ideas or had complexities to them that don't make them viable at the current time. Knowing what our likely deficit would be, we tiered recommendations. We certainly scaled back the level of reduction the closer that function got to schools. So that's why you see, in finance and human resources and IT, the heaviest reductions. In my case, 7 positions in the business office. In the case of HR and IT, 5 each. But then we downscale the level of reductions in our academic areas, again, kind of knowing what our likely deficit would be. So it's been a months-long process. Again, we recognize the human impact, but we want to make a decision as soon as possible, again, to give that runway for employees to know where they'll be placed, but also, as Doug said, we likely will see further vacancies and retirements between now and June 30th that would give those employees additional opportunities to move into. So the sooner we can act, the longer the runway is for our employees to have those chances, opportunities, transfer abilities. So with that, we will stop bring it back behind the rail for any questions you may have. Again, there are two actions. The first action we need from you, and if Jeff, you want to go to that slide, will be to settle on the enrollment scenario we want to consider for fiscal year 27. Again, based on new information we have about Matter Academy not having the ability to open in August of 2026 like we thought. And then again, the second decision after you make a decision on enrollment will be consideration of this budget reduction plan. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mathers. You said you'd take about an hour, and you did, so thank you for that. What I'd like to do, I know this was a lot. I'd like all the trustees to have an opportunity to review their notes and prepare any questions they may have. I've had a few cups of coffee this morning. What I'd like to do is just recess for about 3 to 5 minutes, and we'll give you a chance to kind of stretch, and then we'll come back if that's okay. All right, thank you. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order here at 11:20 a.m. The Board of Trustees work session for January 27th. Thank you for allowing us a quick recess. Recess was always my favorite subject in school, so it's also my favorite subject for the school board. Okay. So thank you, gentlemen, for the in-depth presentation. I also want to give a shout out to all of our school district leadership that's in the audience today. Thank you for your attention and being here, and for the service that you continue to do for our schools and our students every day. Thank you. That doesn't go unnoticed. So now's the time really to ask the questions. I know there's a lot of them. My thought was we could start with Trustee Smith and kind of go around the dais, and then once the questions are asked, we'll have public comment, then we'll bring back the board for further discussion and deliberation, okay?
Mr. President, if I may,
Yes, please.
I just wanted to be acknowledged at the.
I'm glad you said that. Let's acknowledge that Vice President Woodley is back in the House at 11:21 a.m. Thank you, sir. Glad to see you. All right. Anything else from anyone? So, having said that, we'll give former President Smith and Trustee Smith the first bite of the apple.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. JJ, could we go to slide 20, please? So I'll start my time off with a few kudos here. So overall, really well done on this presentation. It's not reflected in slide 20, but the evolutions you made in this plan got to the spirit of why I did originally prefer the voluntary separation under the other context, because you have a plan here that maintains the positions for employees who want to stay by the end of the year, which was fundamentally why I liked that aspect of it, but you managed to accomplish it with this plan here, and I just think that that was really well done. You've handled this entire situation with a lot of care and grace, and again, I think this team is a model for others to follow. So on slide 20, just something that I also want to say thank you for. The very first bullet, in general, I think that it's always a good idea when we try to convert consultants or vendors for permanent positions and move those to in-house roles. So I wanted to take an opportunity to really bring attention to that. That's in that that first bullet there. I think that that's really a smart move. Wherever we can reduce consultants and vendors that we need consultants and vendors, but when we have permanent roles and we can see savings by bringing them in-house, I always think that that's a good move. So I appreciate that very much. Now, what I also wanted to point out on this slide is it's not so much of a question, it's more of a signal to my colleagues that as it relates to the home hospital teachers, I very much appreciate the answers that staff provided to me and by extension to the entire board in this area. This is not something that I have a personal expertise around, but the lived experience of our educators versus maybe the higher level analysis, there might be some gaps there. So on the other side of public comment, you're going to hear me advocate to direct this particular line item back to the superintendent for additional analysis. Not a no for it, not a yes for it, just a request that we measure twice before we cut, because the public comment that we've received seems to indicate that this could be an additional conversation. And this board has a history with that. When staff has come forward and said, hey, can you take another look? We have voted to do that, and then staff has very often come back with an adjusted recommendation. So it's not really a question so much because this is not an area where I feel I have any expertise to ask direct questions on, but it seems like in this one area it warrants taking another look on it. And so I just wanted to signal to my colleagues that you'll hear me advocating for that on the other side of public comment. But otherwise, very, very well done. I have no other questions besides the ones that I have previously submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Smith. Good morning, Trustee Nicolette.
Good morning. JJ, slide 13, please. And I, too, will start out with a big applause. Okay, I said I would. A big applause because I can't even imagine the thousands of hours and meetings and faces that were in the rooms that had to sift through all of these. And of course, I think there's always a stone that is left to be overturned, but I think the big ones definitely were lifted and looked at, and I really appreciate that. To that, I have two questions. First is a question that doesn't need a slide, but I can't help, and I want to be very careful with this. I can't help when we continue to talk about decreased enrollment that we need to continue, because I'm sure it's been in discussion, talk about the impacts and the personnel impacts when we are looking at decreased enrollments. I am so thrilled to be able to hope that no one is going to lose their job unless they want to go and define a new future, and I applaud them for that. But I can't help but think, as we continue to talk about decreased enrollment, that we have to really do a crosswalk that directly relates to our programming in our schools. And I don't know what that means. I'm not the expert, but I'm going to assume that those discussions are already being had for the future, because I think we need to really look at that. And those are some real tough conversations. But to slide 13, at the very bottom bullet, reductions to central services will result in some service level reductions. I think it's pretty easy to assume that there will be some trickle through effects in the decisions that we will make together. Thank you. Have you had around what that would look like? Examples, not theory, but really some hard examples.
I'll just give two in my office, because I don't think I did a great job explaining one of them earlier, and then I'll turn it over to Doug. But in purchasing, we are looking at potentially, in our warehouse, longer turnaround times on purchase requisitions. Still not horrible, but we will not be able to whip around a purchase requisition received at a school or department as fast as we may have used to, turning it around into a purchase order where the services can be ordered and delivered. And then another one is, again, in our accounts payable department, where kind of historically the notion was pay vendors as fast as possible. And a lot of vendors have gotten used to being paid within 2 weeks. Well, we don't have to pay them within 2 weeks, and a lot of agencies actually slow down the payment process to get that interest off of our money, right? So we might go from paying vendors on average within 2 weeks to on average within 3 weeks, and we can go out 4 weeks in most cases per our contract. So those are just two examples of where we've exceeded, I think, industry standards before, and we've got to just recognize we can't continue to do that. And for schools who are relying on a purchase requisition to be whipped around, they can always call us and we can put it up at the top of the priority pile. But it's just, as a regular course of business, it may take a little longer to get that purchase order out the door. So those are two examples in my shop.
And I'll provide a couple of examples, and perhaps a shameless plug. So I think part of it, I mentioned a lot through my service level reduction conversation, that we're using technology and tools to help automate and streamline some things. But we do prioritize the level of things that might come into, let's say, human resources, right? If you're requesting a copy of your employee file that previously I could have probably turned around in 72 hours, it might take me 5 days, right? So it might just take a little bit longer to get that. And if it's just for, you don't really need it urgently, okay, it might just take me a little bit longer. But with that, we had tried to identify some things in collaboration with IT recently. that there's a new chat bot like on our WCSD website. And if you need to know where to find a leave request form, you can now type into the chat bot. It'll actually bring back both of the leave request forms that you would need. My team was previously handling all of these via email or a phone call, like where do I find my leave request form? In our previous website, kudos to our communications department for having a new website. The search function is far better, and the chatbot is far better. So service level reductions in our still manual processes might take a little bit longer, so turning around that employee file to you might take an extra day or two. But things that we're trying to shift from those people doing that manual work will hopefully be alleviated by some of the technology that we're implementing. So that's in the HR space. I think I'll speak a little bit to the IT space as well. Let's say in the network space, there's a project that you want to get done, and you're trying to stand up a new, let's say, new Wi-Fi in a new space, right? That project may be a little delayed because we don't have enough resources to go get that project done. So that's the service level reductions I think we're referring to. Again, to Mark's point, if it's urgent and needs to be escalated, we'll certainly shift work within human resources, IT, or any department, really. But some service at some point will be reduced.
Thank you, and that is the trickle-through effect that I talk about. And I'm going to assume something because this is how we do business, and I'm very proud of this, is that as we go along, this information will be shared with anybody who needs to know it. Our administrative assistants come to mind, and Principal Diane wants something tomorrow, and it's not going to quite happen that way. So bravo on the communication that will emerge from all this. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Nicolette. I don't have a whole lot of questions either. We've met, we've studied this, we've been working on this since September, so thank you for your effort. You had talked about some of the personnel may get relocated to some of our schools, perhaps as administrative assistants. Have you identified some of those schools yet, or is it too early?
Thank you for the question. So we've identified in our current analysis, yes, but these positions wouldn't end until June, right? So
Okay,
the people are
right.
still in their position until June. So I really need to see what's going to be vacant for next year. So schools may have a vacancy. I'll use SWOPE as an example. They recently had an administrative vacancy, which they filled, which is great. They need to fill that because they have a whole spring semester ahead of them. But as those become vacant, we're going to continue to track those and make sure that we hold the ones vacant where we have no other alternative for someone being displaced, and we need to hold on to that to put that person in that position. So I wouldn't say that we've identified specific sites yet because we're 5.5 months away from having to implement that.
Yeah, what triggers the question for me is we've had principals, one in particular I know came to this meeting, talked about the concern of lack of administrative support, and so I won't say that name as much as I'd like to, but that's what was on my mind, sort of the premise of the question. Earlier in the presentation too, I know we'll take this up in the motion, talked about potential addition to NIAA, potential addition for lacrosse as an example. Can you better crystallize that potential addition? What does that mean?
So for lacrosse, it was sanctioned during the last legislative session,
Right.
But Senate Bill, I think it was 305, also included a section that stated that just because a sport is sanctioned, a school doesn't have to participate. So although it was sanctioned, we need to ensure that we have enough demand to field lacrosse teams. Would probably be the major one there. Cheer wasn't sanctioned, but our understanding is that there's discussions about cheer potentially being sanctioned. So until we know more on that, that's more of a placeholder, like lacrosse, until we can figure out what the demand is, and if we would proceed with that.
So that makes sense. The money's there. We're just potentially going to fund these sanctioned sports that don't yet exist, but should the demand be there, the funding is there.
Correct.
Yeah, and I just one trustee. I've been talking about lacrosse since I've been on this board. I'm hopeful that there'll be success and that there will be demand and that it'll be a nice addition to our lineup. So thank you for that. Following a little bit up on Trustee Smith's question, slide 20, can you tell us how many home hospital teachers we're talking about? How many positions, yeah?
So the net overall reduction is 2 positions. There's currently 5. So there's in the home hospital department, there would be the 3 that were deleted, but then we're adding the 1 at Piccolo. So the net reduction is 2 home hospital teachers.
Okay, thank you. And again, just some comments, looking at slide 21, I think that was an addition, just really positive. We're not losing deans, we're not losing campus supervisors, we're not losing, doesn't say it on here, we're not losing police officers. The 19 positions that impact 38 employees, nobody's seeing a decrease in pay. Yes, very positive work, maintaining class sizes. So thank you. Those are my thoughts and questions. Thank you. Vice President Woodley.
Thank you, President Mayberry. If you don't mind, I'm still getting my notes together. I was listening to the whole presentation. I was at the NIAA meeting, but I did have these on. So I heard and I was taking notes, and I just want to align them with the slides. Thank you.
Clerk Hall.
Sure, I can jump ahead. Thank you, President Mayberry. If we could go back to slide 13, I just have a couple of questions about the budgeting for lacrosse. That would be, and cheer. So currently the schools that have those as clubs already, they do have some budget for them. So is that incorporated? And then for lacrosse, is that also including boys and girls lacrosse for that budget?
So I'll answer your second question first.
Okay.
Yes, it's both boys and girls lacrosse.
Okay.
When a school has
Or sorry, slide 10, not 13. I'm sorry.
No problem. When a school has a club or activity, those are funded through what we call slots, through slot pay in the WA agreement. Those are separate from when a sport is sanctioned. So those slots are based on a formula, and those slots would remain at the school and could be repurposed for other activities. And then so I guess to answer your question, there's no offset based on it moving from a club to sanctioned sport.
So this would be new funding, but the school would be able to retain any funding that they are currently using for both of those sports, which, by the way, have always been sports, not clubs. So I am all for us sanctioning them. And then that was going to be my next piece was, are those schools able to retain that funding? And then for cheer, does that include fall and winter?
It includes, so this would be different than the regular fall or winter cheer.
This is the competitive
cheer.
Okay. Which runs a little different. Yeah.
Correct.
Former cheer coach, so I'm aware of that. Yes, thank you. My next question for this slide is the JAG program is incredible and amazing. And by the way, every single student should take at least the first session of JAG because it is focused on college and career and creating a resume and how to do interviews and amazing. Is there a chance has there been any talk of the legislature renewing this funding in the next session? Are they looking at it during IFC with the fact that it's ended in the middle of a school year?
So this program used to be funded by the state, and then the state stopped funding the program, so we took it over with federal grants. I'm not aware at this time of the state having discussions of picking
Picking it
up,
back up.
the
Okay.
costs, which is why we have it here as a general fund addition.
Okay. Totally worthy cost, by the way. Incredible program. And if any of my colleagues haven't visited a JAG class, 100% worth it. Slide 17. Sorry, I had a lot of notes. The question on IT, on the asset management, with the reduction in service for that, would the asset management, would that put additional stress on our admin staff at the school level to manage assets, like laptop carts, et cetera?
Thank you for the question. So in the analysis, I think with Chief Turner, I think we added some hours recently to the ETSs that are on site at all of our elementary schools.
Okay.
That may need to pick up some of that. But otherwise, no, we
Okay.
don't anticipate there to be an added burden at our school sites.
Okay, they've already been sort of given that time, and that shift has already started to
Yeah,
happen a
and
little bit.
then
Okay.
within our secondary space, for example, there is still a person that is in the asset management group. So
Okay.
we're not anticipating, let's say, administrative staff at the secondary sites having to pick anything up.
Okay, great. And in the next slide, which would be 18, I guess. Sorry, yes. Okay, 18. For the dispatch position, are we anticipating any impact of communication? I know we've been filling this position through a retiree, but if we're eliminating the position altogether, will this impact any kind of communication for service calls?
Thank you for the question again. So in my conversation with Chief Baker, we actually just went through a reorganization and realignment within school police. I don't know if you all remember that. And we created a clerk/dispatch position
Okay.
to help pick up some of the overflow that would happen in the dispatch space that this position was previously filling as a full-time allocation, right,
Got it.
if you will.
Okay. That is wonderful and very reassuring. I'm sure that the community appreciates quick communication with our police, so I really appreciate that. I'm going to see if we can phone a friend for my next question and have Chief Van Tress come up and help with a few of the home hospital questions, if that's okay. So as Trustee Smith alluded to, we did get quite a few emails, and Piccolo is one of my schools, so this is a conversation that I've had. I also just happen to have some personal knowledge of home hospital. The home hospital teachers have taken great, incredible care of my nephew for the last 6 years, who's been in and out of the hospital having several surgeries. He's a CLS student at Spanish Springs. So I do feel pretty comfortable having a little bit more of a detailed discussion. And I already asked Chief Van Tress a couple of questions, but I wanted to just put it out there. So the first question is about the potential of converting all of the PT positions, the OT, the board certified behavior analyst, and the speech and language. And in the past, we've wanted to fill those positions, and we really have struggled to fill them. And I know that the new WEA contract and the move that we've made, we feel excited about the potential, but I'd really like to know, what conversations you've been having to kind of reassure us that those are going to be filled and that we're not going to be approving a contract 2 months from now in another board meeting. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Thank you for the question. Jennifer Van Tress, Chief Academic Officer for Student Development and Success. So as far as our related services and changing them over to FTEs, the HR team did a great analysis of looking at what is our competitive salaries in our area, and we have not been competitive for OTs, PTs, speech, audiologists for years. Personally, I met with a potential new hire for an OT back in the fall and said, okay, what'll it take to make sure that we're competitive with the position that she was offered with a local hospital? And she said, well, this is how this would match up. This is how it would look. And so we worked with the team, with the HR team, and said, okay, well, this is where the salaries match up. And based on that, that was, I believe, set some of the groundwork for us to add that portion to the negotiated agreement. I will tell you, I've heard numerous positives from contracted people and from others in the area that are saying, finally, like, I want to work for the district, and now finally the contract is competitive, and we're looking forward to having the opportunity to no longer be a contracted employee, but actually be a Washoe County School District employee. So the feedback so far has been tremendously positive.
That's wonderful. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in IEPs and we have wanted that the team wanted to put these resources in an IEP, and oftentimes we are then adding it to an IEP and then immediately having parents signing saying, if we can't find a contractor, we may not be able to provide these services. I mean, it's heartbreaking because our students really, really need some of these services. So thank you so much to the whole team for that and just that reassurance. And so now on the home hospital, just some clarification on that. I know that during the pandemic, we had a lot of students who were on home hospital because they maybe had a fragile immune system or whatever. And I know that we had to increase the number of home hospital. But my understanding is that the vast majority of students on home hospital are actually, their IEP and their schoolwork is still managed by their school. They're the teachers at their school, their resource teacher or their CLS teacher, SIP, whatever program that they're in. And then beyond that, then we have dedicated home hospital teachers. And so we have five currently. One would be housed full-time at Piccolo, and then the other two would handle the students that are not being handled by their school. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So what we do currently, so we do have 5 allocations. Every year we go to FRC and budget that 5th position in order to provide the funds for zoned teachers to provide the home hospital services.
Okay.
So we have been doing that for years. Last year we had 13 students receiving home hospital from zone teachers. This year we currently have 9. We maintain a list of teachers in the past. We have 31 teachers over the past several years have actually been doing the home hospital services. So this is not like something new or different. This has been a standard practice for us for several years. Yes, the zoned school maintains the IEP. So there is always the special education teacher at the zone school is still the case manager. They're still responsible for all of the IEPs, the eligibilities, all of the documentation, the progress reports. The special ed teacher and the gen ed teacher are responsible for all curriculum, and they provide that curriculum to the home hospital teacher, or they themselves are the ones providing the services for the students that are home hospital.
So the plan, and my understanding is that the home hospitals, if we reduce it to 2, moving the 1 position to Piccolo full time because there's a group of students that are already assigned to that school. So as of right now, based on the numbers, each of those 2 teachers would have 5 with some room to grow if there's some movement. And if there's a huge influx, we have a list where we could do some movement there.
Correct. And as you pointed out, we haven't looked at our home hospital numbers or in our allocations since COVID. And we learned a lot during COVID about how we can provide services for students via technology and keeping kids connected to their zone schools. So we do have situations where kids are on home hospital, but they Zoom into their classes at their schools so that they're connected with their peers, they're connected with their teachers, so we're keeping those connections together. So yes, so we will continue the practice, and these currently are fixed. We will watch the numbers if we have an increase. I have an amazing team sitting right here next to me that have always been supportive of our most vulnerable population. So that will always be a potential.
And I just want to reiterate that the vast majority of our home hospital students are on a temporary home hospital, and so they're often continue to manage by their school, and their own teacher is the one that's typically visiting them, not these full-time teachers.
It varies for the reason. So let's say that we have a student who's broken their back or they just had surgery. Yes, we would want to encourage and make sure that the zone staff are the ones being able to support the students. We do have some long-term students that
Okay.
have more intense needs that basically have been on home hospital for years.
Okay.
And so those are some of our students that the home hospital teachers would continue to support and potentially have that connection with the school that has our more medically fragile students. So
Got it.
between those.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And then I think that's all I had for that question. Thank you so much, Chief Ventress. I'm sorry. I just have two more little things. Okay, I'm sorry. I also wanted to ditto the slide 21 and the increase in that. I spend a lot of time in districts around this state for my day job. And I spent a week in another district last week, and I can tell you that this is not the case in most of our districts, that these things are staying. I am seeing it all over the news. I'm talking to teachers regularly with the work that I do, and these are not what our other districts are keeping. They are asking their schools to cut their budgets. They are increasing their class sizes. They are canceling middle school sports in one district. So I just want to just shout out our team again for doing the work to try to keep these budget cuts away from the direct instruction as best as we possibly can. It's just incredible. And I do want to shout out keeping the MTSS positions. I understand that funding ended, but multi-tiered systems of support, which is what that stands for all non-educators. We use lots of acronyms in education, but MTSS is an incredibly important piece, and moving those behavior positions from deans and keeping these MTSS positions, I think we will continue to see the student behavior numbers that we have already seen, the increases in great feedback we're getting from our schools and the decreases in the real serious behavior situations. I think we will continue to see that, and I am so glad that we are prioritizing this because our kids need that person to connect to, and they need the support from these folks. My last question, I promise, is for Doug. For the WEA and the WESPA positions, if we're able to vote to move forward, will these folks be able to immediately enter into, because I know the transfer window's open and principals are interviewing literally right now for next year, so will they immediately be able to know and be able to get into the transfer pool?
Thank you for the question. The short answer is yes.
Okay.
They've already been informed that this is pending your approval, and
Okay.
should it be approved, we will re-communicate with those individuals
Wonderful.
that they should be looking at current opportunities.
Okay, wonderful, thank you, and I think that's it.
Thank you, Clerk Hall. Wonderful questions. Morning, Trustee Westlake.
Thank you, President Mayberry. Well, thanks to Trustee Hall, my concerns for the home hospital teachers, it has been alleviated. I mean, and to Chief Ventress, I know things can come up. One of my questions was going to be, what have we normally seen in a high need for that? And that was answered pretty clearly. And also, if all of a sudden we saw a huge influx, which, God, I hope not. I don't want to see our children, suffer at any length, a day, a week. But there's a plan in place if that were to happen. So I don't need to go over that. On page 15, I think it was, though, I don't think we really discussed the pilot programs or duplicate programs. So we looked at everything. There's not any other pilot programs. I don't want to see something that could really help our students be taken away, but if it could be frozen till we get over this bad hump. I mean, was there anything sitting there that we could maybe freeze for a while?
Sure. So On the pilot programs, on the general fund side of things, we don't have any new pilot programs. The budget initiatives related to the strategic plan are the closest thing we have to a pilot program, but those are all initiatives that we wanted to preserve during this process. Okay. As far as duplicate services, that would be like the SIP deans that will convert to board certified behavior analyst, okay, as an example. I think there was a contract one in there as well that we were able to resolve.
And I think what we were getting at there too, I mean, I should have said before even the summer of last year, you know, the HR office and Doug went through organizational reviews, right, that again did align similar services, and the chiefs continue to go through that. There are really positive implications of that. So, for example, Grants Fiscal came into the business office. The Grants Fiscal Department used to be outside the business office. Well, they do accounting. Well, we've got an accounting. Jeff's not over accounting, but we got to have an accounting team. So there are overlaps in processes and techniques that by having them side by side, we can make a reduction there in terms of kind of the work done by our Grants Fiscal team. And to some extent, you know, we have synergies with grants and budget similarly. So we're just starting to probe that. But I think that's what we were starting to get to. There are lots of opportunities based on the organizational work that Doug led that we're still uncovering. But we certainly uncovered a number of them here as part of this process, and they have helped identify those efficiencies.
And I'll just add, and since Mark talked about HR, I'll talk about finance and purchasing. But I think there were a lot of questions came up with regards to, so I'll use document shredding services, for example, right? Each department almost would have their own contract for document shredding services. And then each school would have their own contract, right? And not all schools would have it, but it would be with different companies. So Andrea Sullivan over the purchasing group, you know, reached out and said, hey, what if we combined all of this and got a better price, right? So it's an initiative she's currently working on that I know is kind of underway, but it's not the only one. So as we identify these kind of, wow, you have a contract for that too, and you have a contract, can we talk about like putting that together and getting a better price? Those are ongoing conversations that will help us in the future, of course, but they just take longer to get through the process.
Okay, no, awesome. I want to say I wish I had half a brain of any one of you gentlemen. I mean, amazing. This is amazing. Absolutely amazing. Just huge amount of work and done. I think I'd mentioned this before. You've executed this with really thinking about our employees and our students, and that's the most important thing, really, at the end of the day. I do have to say one thing, and I want to apologize because I know I sound like a broken record, and I'm going to especially apologize to Superintendent Ernst because he's probably heard me say this so many times. I am really concerned about the Mater, and I understand it's not a threat right now, but it will be very soon. I mean, we're already into 26. That's crazy to me. And I am not against charter schools. What I am against is businesses for profit moving in and bleeding our state of money, of capital. And I would like to see sooner or later us go on the offense and think of a way to counter this, to have something that we can present to the public that is as good or better than what Mater is bringing in. So that being said, I'm not going to belabor it, but you guys are amazing. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Trustee Westlake. Good morning, Trustee Phoenix.
All righty. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you in the back there. All that hard work and effort. These gentlemen up here up front getting all kudos, but we all know staff does the work, and we know what it's like to be on staff to make things happen. making those good recommendations. So I just have to totally echo you all back there, because I know not just you, but the rest of the WCSD and everybody else involved, that's huge. And everyone did their part. And coming up front here, communicating that, and I said it before, I'll say it again, that you took the time months in advance to bring this forward, and you communicated with the staff, and everyone was understanding what we were doing, where we were going, and why, and everybody participated, and everybody did a great job. So I appreciate all of that. That's one of the things about management, as some of you may know, you got to be able to communicate that from the top down and then turn that back up and make it happen. So I appreciate that. Going to the questions that I had, one was the home hospital update. So that was totally in detail. Thank you on that. The other was the NIAA lacrosse cheer. I believe Adam squared that one away for me. You asked a lot of those questions, and it came back up again, because you know those things are important to the community, and so we're doing our best to maintain that. I already talked about the communication, but that face-to-face and having that, you can't go wrong with just saying this is how it is. So I appreciate that. A couple of times you mentioned about we believe. So in your presentation, and just kind of see where we can go about, we will, or we can, or here's the best guess on digital data, what we're going with. I appreciate that. I only heard it a couple times, so that's it. We know that the Matter Academy is coming up, and this is where my input to you all is the way forward. And so what is the way forward for that? Not a question. I just want to put that out there, that you're thinking about these things like you have done with this whole thing that you're doing now. In months in advance, taking the time and taking the effort to think about how and where we're going that, so we're having a good idea of what it's all about and what our actions are. And then this is the question for you. This is for Department of Labor and that whole idea. And I know you shake your head. I just wanted to hear, what are our next steps? What's the way forward? If you don't have anything, appreciate it later on, because I know trying to get where we need to really fight that fight is at the state, and we have at that federal level to make that squeeze down to it's going to work best for WCSD. So I just want to know what y'all think about that. Sorry about that.
I think I'll get back to you later. I think I'll take you up on that.
So with that, again.
I mean, we're playing catch up, because again, the federal government did this kind of undercover, right, of the darkness of the night or whatever. I mean, we just became aware of it in the last month. And so I think we need to continue to analyze it and report back.
And I appreciate that. I just want to put that out there. Those are the, because everyone else, we've all talked about the things that are going great, things that we've done for this go-around. And we know we have future go-arounds ahead of us, and we're looking at that. But again, for me, just looking the way forward as I use here for those two big pieces about the Academy and Department of Labor and the state, so we can just try to find a way how this works and what can we do. So those are my comments, and thank you very much for everyone for all that you do.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Phoenix. What we're going to do is, I know Trustee Smith has a quick follow-up question. We're going to go to her. Then we're going to conclude with Vice President Woodley, and then I'm going to go for public comment. So, Trustee Smith.
Thank you very much, President Mayberry. I also found the exchange between Chief Van Tress and Clerk Hall to be really helpful, and so I might also phone a friend. That was really helpful. When the questions I have, though, possibly for Chief Van Tress, and why I still prefer that this be something that go back, it may very well come back to us, but to take another look, is that when the people that are, because I'm looking at the public comment, that's my first question. Have you seen the emails? Okay, fantastic. So why do the public comments from these teachers suggest that the caseloads haven't decreased, and if anything, they're high as ever? Like, I always look for signals when there's a disconnect. So my advocacy on taking another look at this is not to not do it, and it's not to definitely do it. But when I see a big disconnect between things, to me, that's a signal to say, can we take a look at this? Doesn't mean you wouldn't bring it back. But is there any insight why the people doing the job don't feel that way?
Thank you for the question. Jennifer Van Tress, again, for the record. Yes, there is some insight. It's always been that our home hospital teachers, and again, this goes back to an area we've never, again, we haven't looked at these numbers or how our staffing ratios are since COVID. And again, we learned a lot during that. So currently, a self-imposed caseload number of about 4 to 5 students has been the standard practice for the home hospital department. Which then, of course, when you have 4 teachers, it limits it to about 16 to 20 students. Anything above that number has always been provided, the services have been provided by zoned school staff. So like I said earlier, we've had in the past up to 31 other teachers across our district providing services. When I look at the numbers over the last couple of years, yes, we are sitting at 29 right now. I think last year was 34. I'm looking at Jeff because we looked at these numbers this morning, 34 and 37, and then the year before that was 34. Again, once we hit that 17, the rest of our students across have always been provided services from zoned. So we've had this self-imposed limit on the number of students that our actual home hospital teachers have provided. We need to look at that model. We need to look at what documentations we're getting from our physicians as to the justification as to why the students need home hospital services and the length of the time that students are getting home hospital services. We've never set any expectations around the doctor's notes or in the physician's notes in the course of health care that can impact the IEPs, and that is another part of this process that we will be moving forward with. I haven't had an opportunity to talk with the teachers. They came straight to you without talking about what our processes will look like moving forward on how we can streamline our services for home hospital students, how we can better utilize resources for that. So yes, I see where they're feeling like there's a disconnect. It's also, for students to be able to provide the services for. They do go through a lot. I mean, it's always a challenging situation when you're working with families that are in crisis. They're going through tough times. They're working, their children are sick or they are hurt, and so that can be a stressful situation. But we do have some other ideas moving forward to streamline our services to help support families better, to keep kids connected to their schools. That's where their peers are, that's where their friends are, that's where their relationships are, and it helps to build the connectedness and keeping them connected with their zone schools a little tighter.
That was really helpful. And then in that same vein, just to clarify so that I really do understand, in another one of the public comments, they had mentioned that the district would be asking teachers to volunteer to drive to their students' houses without mileage compensations, working for an hour after planning after their own full school day, and being compensated $30 an hour. Is that accurate? And just because I'm creating a baseline of understanding, because again, my advocacy here was to take another look and make sure those conversations happen. Measure twice, cut once. It's just the kind of person I am, and so I'm curious if that's accurate or not.
No, it's not accurate. We pay mileage, we pay prep time, we pay. It's now in the new contract under the WEA new contract that we called out specifically for teachers that are providing the home hospital services. We take care of that because we understand that's above and beyond what their current contracts are, and so we work really hard to make sure that they're feeling valued and able to keep those connections. So no, that's why we convert that 5th position to give me the budget to pay for all of those the costs that the teachers from the zone schools are doing.
Okay, I appreciate that. So depending on where the action goes today, I'm still going to ask that these conversations happen, because through no one's fault, if I'm being really honest, when a team sees a cut like this coming or a change that's recommended, and this is the way they feel, it still to me represents that there's a disconnect here. I don't believe anybody, or certainly any of our teachers, send us emails willingly misrepresenting things. So that to me says that there's not an equal understanding about this. So depending on where the pleasure of the board moves, I am still going to ask that this team be sat down with, because it sounds like there's different understandings or perceptions, and that is important to me. And I will also completely disclose that as a cancer survivor myself, this one It gets me in a different way. So it is very important that, since it does appear that there's a different functional understanding on an executive level than the people that are doing this work, it worries me. It worries me in this particular case. But I appreciate you are giving the information that is accurate. I believe the people emailing us are giving us the information that they believe to be accurate. And regardless of whoever's right or wrong, that there just needs to be a better understanding about these things. So that's all I ask. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Smith. Thank you, Ms. Van Tress. Vice President Woodley.
Thank you. I only need to look at one slide, 16, please. I'm really appreciative of the one-on-one briefings that we had. It made it easier, more palatable to absorb all this information and digest it. First off, I want to acknowledge the individuals we have in front of us. This is a budget presentation, but I think it should be acknowledged that we have our HR director up here up front. That sends a message to everyone on what is important for this organization. So I like that, and thank you for doing that. We appreciate it. For us on the board, I believe our number one priority is the success of our agency, the district, and a balanced budget. I mean, that's one of our number one priorities. We have a fiduciary responsibility, but it's not just on us, it's also on everyone that's in here in the audience, all of our staff. So we appreciate all the hard work that went into it. We appreciate the 4 months. I think it was more than 4 months, but I know that it was several months of hard work that went into it. I mean, starting back in June of 2025, that's when we were informed of the 10 million, and then in September, 18 million. And we're talking about 18 million, and if we approve what we have before us today, we have a balanced budget, no layoffs, 18 million. I remember 2010, I personally gave out slips to individuals at an agency, and we had a 15 million deficit, and we gave out 90 slips to individuals. So I lived it, and I remember that. I appreciate that while we were doing all this and looking at this 18 million, we approved COLAs for all of our unions. I'm happy. I'm glad that we were able to do that. We're not considering class sizes. We're not reducing funds that we dedicated for clubs and curricular activities, which is very important to me because that's what kept me in school. I appreciate that. We're not reducing deans in schools. We're not addressing the standalone principles that we addressed, and we're not reversing that. So I'm happy for that. We're keeping our campus monitors. That's great. I really appreciate that. That's a beautiful thing. We're not losing any of our police officers. And most importantly, we're not laying off any teachers. We have a district down the street from us that's going to be giving out slips next month. And I, similar to my colleague, Trustee Hull, I have talked to other districts, and they're looking at some real serious, they're talking about teachers, not just classified, classified positions, but actual teachers. I appreciate the hard work you guys have done. I appreciate the intricacy that you guys went in there and looked and carved out and saw what was in the best interest of the organization. What can we move here? What can we move there? Is there going to be some discomfort? Absolutely. But I can tell you for a fact that the individuals that I gave slips to, they would have preferred some discomfort. And I know the individuals that are going to get slips next month would prefer some discomfort if they had that option. So I just want to express gratitude to you guys. I know we're not out of the woods yet. I know we're not clear. It is. And if this is hard, buckle up because it's coming one way or the other. So I'm glad that we're able to get this done as quickly and swiftly as we can to give people leeway, give them some time, give them some notice. We have another budget coming up in July. So I'm glad we are where we are now and that we're not giving out any slips. So thank you for the hard work. Thank you to you. Thank you to all of you in the audience. We appreciate it. We really do. And we know that you guys have looked at everything. You guys are even counting light bulbs. I know that for a fact. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Vice President Woodley. So I'm going to move to public comment on this item. Any public comment? I apologize. I'm going to allow Trustee Westlake for a quick follow-up. Go ahead, ma'am.
Sorry, and thank you, President Mayberry. And this might seem like I'm waffling, but this is why I love the discussions. And I didn't know you could do the phone a friend, really. I see you guys do it at that table all the time. So, but now I know. Now it is in my toolbox. And this is not saying anything negative towards Chief Van Trust. I don't know of too many people with a bigger heart than her for what she does. But with the evolving of the discussions, it seems like this little piece, the home hospital teaching piece, is kind of in the works. It doesn't sound, working on a policy, working on how to do this and do that. It doesn't sound like we have a direct path carved in stone. And so then I'm listening to my fellow trustee Smith, and I too now am a little concerned that this has not been ironed out completely. And it might just be a communication thing. It probably is a lot of communication thing where the employees haven't had an opportunity to enter into this significant discussion that we have. And so I am a little bit worried about that piece now. So I don't know. I would like to see maybe that be taken out and that handled and then brought back when it is more concrete. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Westlake. I am going to go to public comment, and then we'll bring this back to the board and we can further just deliberate. JJ, any public comment?
The board received emails from Brandy Richmond, Charlene Langley, Christy Bartlett, and Cameron Rogers.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll bring this back to the board for discussion. One quick comment I want to make is to the 38 employees that are impacted in some form or another. Despite that everybody keeps a job, we recognize that certainly there's some disruption to your lives, to your lifestyle. You may have to go to a different site. We recognize that. Those things aren't lost on us. But we are grateful for the work that the team has done, and that you're still part of this team. You're still part of this family. And I think one of the trustees, Trustee Westlake, referenced the Mater issue. I mean, that's still on the radar. So next year it's going to be a little bit more challenging than where we are today, truly. So again, that's not lost on us. Well, colleagues, it's 12:15. Like to kind of wrap this up. A lot of good comments. Sounds like we're moving in the right direction. I'm happy to entertain a motion or have some further discussion on particular items. What's the pleasure of my colleagues?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, Trustee Woodley.
President, thank you. I'm going to read off
Vice President Woodley.
all
sorry.
three. No worries. All three, just as is stated up here. Okay. Oh, do you have? Thank you so much. I have an even better one right here. Thank you, Trustee Ho. I move that the Board of Trustees directs the superintendent to prepare the FY27 budget based on enrollment projections that do or do not include the enrollment impacts associated with Mater Academy. Oh, thank you. I move that the Board of Trustees directs the superintendent to prepare the FY27 budget based on enrollment projects that do not include the enrollment impacts associated with Mater Academy. Approve the budget reduction plan with estimated cost of $5,727,558 and directs the superintendent to report back on the potential status of additional NIAA sanctioned sports and other potential costs, as well as potential reimbursement of iReady at the next budget work session in February 2026.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the table from Trustee Vice President Woodley to approve item 2.01 with a second by Trustee Nicolette. Any further discussion? Yes, Trustee Smith.
Yes, I just want to state for the record that I'm going to be a yes on this vote, but I do want to register for the record that I do hope that we can get back with that team and try to resolve the clear gap in understanding. It's obviously there. I'm a yes for the proposal. Thank you so much for your work.
Okay. Yeah, Trustee Smith, that is a comment that she's made. It's not a motion. It's a comment.
That is correct. Thank you, President Mayberry.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Trustee Westlake.
Sorry, it's getting confused. When can we do a friendly? When can we do a friendly?
You do a friendly now.
Okay. I would like to offer up a friendly that the home hospital program be eked out and come back along with the iReady and the NIAA. Just pull it out and that little portion come back with the NIAA and the iReady with follow-up presenting a follow-up.
Okay, so if I understand the motion, you're amending the motion to carve out the hospital teaching. What does that look like for the budget? Is that it?
Hold on.
Yeah.
The friendly has to be.
There's even a second or the maker of the motion is even okay with it, because if they're not, then there's no reason to even discuss.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. This is the parliamentary training that the new president needs from the General Counsel. So we're going to refer to the original motion from Vice President Woodley.
I appreciate the amendment. Unfortunately, I'm not open to making that amendment or accepting it because I want staff to move forward as quickly as possible with any determinations as it relates to positions.
So that motion effectively.
So the friendly is not added to the motion. Now, under parliamentary procedure rules, if the chair wants to entertain, there could be a motion to add it to the current motion, and then that would take precedent over the current motion. You would vote on whether or not it even gets added, and then you would vote on the final motion, if that makes sense.
It does. Okay. Yeah, I'm obliged to stay with the current motion as is. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we do have a first, we do have a second. Any further discussion? Clerk Hall?
I just wanted to add to that piece. My only concern is, and since you've already said that we're not going to add it, but I think it's also incredibly important that the teachers that will not be in home hospital anymore have the opportunity to be in this transfer window when the majority of positions are open. And so I want to be really clear that my vote for yes has to do with the fact that this gives them the best opportunity to pick a site that they want to be at rather than later in the process. As somebody who has been in that transfer window, later in the process means less opportunities and maybe not your desired opportunities. And I think that's an incredibly important piece that I don't know how many of us have been in that position before, but it's something that I think is incredibly important. And I have the utmost faith that Chief Van Tress will be speaking with these teachers individually and working directly with them to bridge the gaps of any miscommunication. But I think it is incredibly, incredibly important that we give them every opportunity to be in this transfer window. And so for that, I will also be in favor of the motion as is. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. All right. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you to the team behind this dais. Thank you to the team in front of us, and most importantly, thank you to all the leadership team in the audience today for your time, your efforts, and your heart. We will adjourn this special meeting, and we have a general business meeting at 2 o'clock today. Thank you. 12:24.